ahead and get started. I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, but it just took a while. We got our group together, so we'll get going today. And you were asking a minute ago, Matt, if okay to ask questions. Really, that's the best part. If we can get some interactive stuff going, and actually, if asking kind of questions as we go really is good. Even if I'm kind of getting somewhere anyway, I think that just gets us there quicker, and we're all on the same page, and so that's good.
Perfect.
I know y'all heard me say too, one of these days, I've been saving some notes, one of these days that I may gather, take the time and I gather it all together and do a book. And just for a little bit of perspective, and I know, John Michael, you and John sat through part of this before, but I know, there's a lot of people out there that do books and articles and discussions and all that on motivation. Okay, and they talk about want to get things done and want to accomplish a lot and all that. But I probably got some thoughts on that. May share a few today. But for the most part, I don't know that I've got anything necessarily to add to that whole discussion of motivation. At the same time, Matt, I know you were talking about time management. There's lots of books out there on time management, and I'm probably pretty good at that. But here again, I don't know that there's much that I could share with you that you couldn't find that somebody else had covered or thought of or talked about or whatever. So the emphasis on what I talk about in this discussion is what I would say is the missing link between those two. Okay? You got a lot of people that's written books about, getting you motivated and want to do a lot of stuff, and you've got a lot of people that have written books on how to manage your time to accomplish things, but for some reason, there's a disconnect between the two. There's a lot of people that want to do what it is they want to do with their life, not just business, but personal and otherwise. There's a lot of people that have got, pretty good time management skills, but there's some gap in between that I don't think anybody has ever had a discussion or a talk or a book on, and that missing link is where I think the whole emphasis is and the whole reason that there's open for discussion there. So that's kind of where we're going with that. How do you go from wanting to do what it is you want to do to actually getting that done? Who can define the word that hasn't been here before? Who can define the word proactive?
Doing something that doesn't have a time limit necessarily, that needs to be done.
All right. Okay. And there's different dictionary definitions of that, but she's right on track with that. Being proactive is, the human nature is such that people are reasonably good. Granted, there's probably people out there that don't ever get anything done anytime, anyway. I get that, but for the most part, most people are pretty good at, okay, you got a deadline, you're supposed to get something done by Friday, that, you sort of get it done by Friday. Now, you might be doing an all-nighter starting at, midnight on Thursday, but people are reasonably good about working towards deadlines. People are not very good at all in doing proactive stuff. Those things that you want to do one of these days when you get around to it. All of us, if we're honest with ourselves, have got a lot of that stuff that I'd like to do one day or going to do when I get around to it, and we don't get it done. And if somebody were to ask you later, Ryan, why didn't you do whatever it is that you talked about doing one of these days? What would you tell them?
Just never got around to it.
Good. Just didn't have run out of time. Too many other things going on, right?
I'm busy.
And that's not to say that Ryan probably wasn't busy, okay? And that he was sitting around, you know, sipping tea or whatever. But at the end of the day, could he have done some of those things over that same period of time? And I would suggest the answer is probably yes. And so that's kind of the emphasis on where we're going with this. I am going to share 2 or 3 quick stories that have to do just in general with kind of planning and this kind of big picture, but then I'm going to get a lot more specific on the whole proactive part of that and how we get there. And I may have had some of these discussions with some of you over the years, so you know that's fine too. But back in 1950, they took the graduating class of Yale University, and they had them all fill out a survey. And one of the main points of the survey is how many of you have a plan for your life? You know, kind of what is it I think I want to do 5 years from now and 25 years from now with my life, personally, business-wise, retirement-wise, relationship-wise, you know, across the board. How many of you, and they took a poll of that. And then they came back 25 years later, in 1975, and they did a survey. And they, now the example I'm about to give you has to do with the business side of it, but I would suggest to you that they were equally successful on the other things they had planned on too, but that was just a little harder to gauge. Were you successful with your family and relationships and all that? But they found out that those 3% of the people, it was only 3%, that had a written plan for their life that they were kind of shooting for. Not that they didn't maybe change it some over the years, things change, but of those 3%, they had accumulated 90% of the wealth of the group. 3% had accumulated 90% of the group. Now again, you'd be missing the point if you thought the emphasis on there was let's decide who can make a bunch of money and how we get there. It really, the emphasis of that example was that those guys had a plan for a lot of areas of their life, and they were able to pull that off because they had some sort of a plan for it, as opposed to just getting up every day and like, let's do the best I can today and just see where things go. They had a plan on where they were going. I know I've probably had this discussion with some of you sometimes, but you know, when you talk about, you know, things you're doing with your life, I know it is real easy to say, well, gosh, there's a lot of people out there that are more talented, that are smarter. Probably smarter is tough with this group, because we've got a smart group here, but that other people out there have some advantage in either, I don't know, the classroom or the movie production or the whatever, and I think there's some myth that there's, you know, like people that are superstars that are out there that just, you know, they've got some break and I just gotta, you know, maybe I can do pretty good with what I got, but I don't have that advantage that some people do. Again, in any of those categories, but I think if you looked around a little bit, you'd figure out that's more myth than reality. And let's talk about a couple of examples. If in the Major League Baseball, if you were to go and see the guys that were hitting, someone tell me what the difference is in a guy that's hitting 333 and a guy that's hitting 250, just as an example.
I mean, 333 is hitting a third of.
That's 2 hits every 20 at bat.
Every at bat, get a fourth.
Okay, and how much is this guy getting?
A fourth.
All right, now, how much money do these guys make that are hitting that in the majors?
Way more than 250.
All right, I mean, these guys are making tens of millions a year. These guys, that's not bad, but there's a lot of these guys. I mean, those guys are making okay money, but they're just sort of the middle of the road guy that, yeah, they'll keep on the team, but that's not who they're building their team around. They're building them on the 300 plus hitters. So here's your superstars, and here's your regular players. Now, you would think, how many of you think if you went to see a baseball game and you didn't have a program that told you that that so-and-so is our superstar, how many of you think you could just watch a game and pick out who the superstar is and who's not the superstar? Pardon?
Not very easy.
Not very easily? Okay, let's talk about that. Let's divide these by 12. So this guy's going to get 4 hits every 12 at-bats. This guy's going to get 3 hits every 12 at-bats. That's just the way to make them, the numbers work. So how long does it take to get 12 at-bats? That's about 3 games or so. You play about maybe 3 games in a week. So point is, if you watched every pitch, every swing, a whole week, one guy got 1 more hit than the other guy, and he's a superstar. So point is, it'd be almost impossible to pick that guy out. Just watching. So but that guy, what makes him the superstar is, in a whole week, out of all those pitches, all those swings, he got 1 more hit. And I would suggest we could do the same math thing that I'll hold in the interest of time on the guys on the PGA tournament. You would think you could pick out the Phil Mickelsons and the Tiger Woods of the world, but here again, out of 280 or so strokes in a whole week, one guy's stroking maybe 1 less time around on the average than just the guys that are getting by, and I would say the same thing on that. Now, what's the point of that? I would suggest that's the same thing to do with our whole life, whether it be personal or business or otherwise. It's that 1 extra hit a week. It's that 1 extra sale a week if you're in the selling business, or whatever the example would be for the moving business or the banking business or whatever. And that's where the superstars are when you total it up after the fact. Those are the guys that are coming out way ahead. One more quick story of that type, just to kind of make the point, and then we're going to get more specific on the proactive thing. Some time ago there was a study done. They put a lot of people in a room, and they were putting puzzles together. If somebody actually knows the answer to this, just hold that. But people don't, I'd like your opinion. So they're putting puzzles together, and they were very complicated puzzles. And they put a lot of very irritating sounds piped in very loudly, glass breaking, fingernails on chalkboards, tires squealing, and all of that together. It was very loud, and it made it very difficult to concentrate. And they said, look, I know this sound is going to make it hard to concentrate, but do the best you can. We want to see how it affects you. And then they had another summer group that they gave the same puzzles, same sound, same cross-section of people, but they put a button over on the wall and said, look, anytime you want to, you can push that button and turn the sound off. Okay? Which group do you think put together more puzzles?
One of the buttons.
One of the buttons?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and why do you think that was?
They were able to concentrate more on the puzzles.
Okay, it was the one with the button. They put together 5 times as many puzzles as the others with fewer puzzles. But the unusual thing is they never once pushed the button. Okay, so now what was the difference in those 2 groups if they never pushed the button? The button could have been disconnected for all that matters. Was that?
Yeah, was that the fact they had the button in their mind?
Okay, but that shouldn't have mattered that much, right? I mean, if you really are just sort of looking at the cause and effect, right, it shouldn't have mattered. Yeah, if you're able to turn it off, I get that. But just having the button, but what the button gave you was all of a sudden you felt like you were in control of your situation. Now, mentally, you can focus on what you've got to do because you're in control. You're not just you don't have external circumstances in control. But it was a significant difference in the amount of puzzles. And they repeated repeated the test several times to make sure they didn't just happen to get a bunch of good puzzle people in the first group and the cross section and then the other. But that doesn't really add up to you if you think just under normal thinking that you just, there's a certain amount of time and a certain amount of things you can get done, but if you're in control, that goes so much further. Okay, so let's get a little more specific now. Those are kind of the just the big picture things. Some years ago, this is starting to get a little more into the heart of where we're going with this on the whole proactive planning thing. Some years ago, I remember I would occasionally be in meetings or do talks with some of the train group. And I was pretty young when I took over the office here in town, but we were consistently one of the top offices around year over year. But I remember having some talks now and then where I said, look, everybody talks about getting around to stuff and how many hours in the day. But I remember several times talking about the fact that I probably, now a lot of this is probably sort of true today, but I've got kids that have moved out and all of that, so I'm really just kind of going back in time here a little bit. But I've said, look, I probably work more hours than anybody I know. Okay, that doesn't necessarily impress anybody because anybody can work hard if they want to. But I said I also probably spend more time with my wife than anybody I know. I said I probably spend more time with my kids than anybody I know. Probably never enough, but just from perspective. I said I probably do more outside business investments and activities than anybody I know. Probably travel more than anybody I know. Probably go to more ball games than anybody I know. Now tell me how that makes sense for if people talk about, gosh, I've only got a certain number of hours in the day, and so if I'm working real hard, it's got to be at the exception of some of those other things, or vice versa. Tell me how I can do those 5 or 6 items, and I don't have any more hours than anybody else. How can you make sense of that?
Not wasting time.
Okay. Anybody else? That's a good answer. I'm not. Anybody's got any comment on that? It doesn't seem to add up from your normal perception that you got a certain amount of time in a day. And you can either do this or you can do that. You can't do all of that because there's not enough hours in the day. That doesn't seem to add up, does it? Yes, ma'am.
You did them all at the same time.
Well, to whatever extent, some of the things you can, either multitask or do something with your wife and your kids or whatever. Yeah, you can sort of get there, but I'm still going to suggest that if you actually count up the number of hours in a week, that it isn't necessarily just trying to do 4 things at one time, although that would certainly help with it. So that is a good answer, but I think it goes beyond that too. But everybody would agree it doesn't seem to add up. Is that correct?
Right.
No disagreement on that. Now, I would suggest to you, here's kind of one of the main takeaways of this whole discussion, and then I'm going to spend some time trying to convince you of this next thing, because if I can, then I think you're going to look at how you plan what you're doing with your life and how you use your time a little bit different every day, every minute. But here's the part that for sure to question or ask questions when I give you some examples, because I need to convince you of this next point. The way people use their time, all of us, because of this whole human nature being reactive, has a whole lot more to do with our habits and our comfort levels than just the hours in the day and the amount of tasks that you want to do. It's, you know, time is not as linear as we think it is. We're not machines where we can punch out so many widgets every 10 minutes. So let me kind of say that first part again. The way we use our time has a lot more to do, lots more to do with our habits and our comfort level than the actual number of hours in the day. Now, that's not to say that we aren't all real busy. I get that. You don't have to tell me that you haven't been sitting around eating chocolates all day, and that's the reason why it's hard to get things done. I get that. I'm saying there's some middle ground, there's some perspective that we're all missing if we put too much focus on that. Now, let me try to give you several examples to prove that point. Now, here again, you know, please take issue with any of this because proving this or getting you to buy into that is a pretty big deal. And let me make back, since Matt asked a question a minute ago about the whole multitasking thing. Let me go through one little quick math exercise before I give you these examples. How many hours are there in a week? Who knows that?
168.
Okay, how'd you know that?
Just know it.
Okay, all right, that's good though. Okay, now, I remember having a discussion once with some sales guys, and one of the guys who was on commission, so he wasn't complaining. You know, if you got a lot of work going on, that means that's a good thing, right? You know, you're spending your time trying to get a lot of business. So, because if you got a lot of business, it takes you time to handle it, and then you get some money when the situation is done. So, again, wasn't saying it is any complaint, but he basically made a point. You know, gosh, you know, I'm not complaining, business is good, but all I do is work. You know, early to late, weekends, and eat, and then I start all over again. I don't have time to do anything else. And I said, okay. I said about how much how many hours you're working in a week? He said, oh, about 55, 60 hours. Okay, that's a lot. That's about 50% more than the norm. I said, well, how much you sleeping a night? He said, well, a lot of times I do it very little. I said, well, let's don't count that. I said, how much do you shoot for getting? He said, oh, about 7 hours. Okay, 7 times 7, that's 49. Now, you add those up, and that's 100, that's 90, that's 104 to
109. Oh, yeah.
104 to 109. Now, that means he's got 64 to 59, or let me do that another way, 59 to 64. He's got 60-something hours unaccounted for, using his own numbers, and not even counting the days where he just did with 3 or 4 hours sleep. Now, when I went through that, he said, that can't be right. There's something wrong with that. He's over there punching through the calculator, and I saw some other guys doing the same thing. Yeah, that can't be right. So he punched it through, but guess what? It is right. Okay? Now, so what's the point of that? We've got 60-something hours that are unaccounted for somebody that says that's all he did was work and sleep and then start all over. The difference is, I always knew where my 64 hours were. And so point is, even if I didn't do any multitasking, Matt, I've got do you know how much, if you kind of make it happen because you want it to happen, because it's a priority, you know how many different things you can do with traveling or with your wife or your kids or your other investments in 64 hours a week? If you really are kind of planning it and making it happen, it's a lot. Now, granted, if you can multitask, okay, you can amplify that. But I guess I wanted to go ahead and kind of make the point early on that that isn't necessarily by itself the explanation on how to make the numbers work, but it is being very efficient with your time. Now, if you like some downtime and being able to hang out and have a beer and watch TV, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, let's just make sure it's on purpose. Let's make sure you're not looking back later and say, gosh, I would have rather have done this, or I would have rather have done that. Do whatever it is you want to do. I'm not giving a rah-rah talk of, gosh, everybody ought to work hard and do all of this. I'm just saying that whatever it is you want to do with your time, let's make sure you're happy with it. And let's make sure you actually can look back and say, I'm happy with what I did, when I did it, and I'm not going to take issue ever with what that really is. Unless you're looking back saying, I'm unhappy, I've lost all of this time, and I didn't do the things that I wanted to do. Then that's kind of where I do fit in. Okay, let me go back to where I was in terms of those examples I wanted to give you. And because I want to convince you of that point of the time not being linear. When I used to be a sales manager with some guys. You know, here we had guys that were working hard, wanted to work hard, wanted to do a lot of business with their clients, and at some point we started figuring out that none of their guys were getting out to call on their clients. They were doing some okay business because they had built up relationships over a period of time, and they could do a fair amount over the phone and whatever. But in terms of them actually busting out to be able to do extra business, they needed to get out and call on their clients a little more and visit with them. And they agreed. This wasn't a matter of me telling them how to do their business, but when we talked about why are you in the office so much and going out to visit your clients so little, which was the way the time was working, what do you think their comments were?
Didn't
know how to start.
Pardon?
Didn't know how to start.
Well, and would normally say, look, I'm not sitting around drinking coffee. You say, I'm working. I want to get out. I'm on commission. Just didn't get around to it. Didn't have the time. Too many. So they were spending all their time administering the paperwork and the handling the orders that they had, and didn't have time to be. And that's the deadline stuff. That's the reactive stuff. Somebody's giving you an order, now you got to handle it, and if you don't get it handled, it doesn't get ordered, the stuff doesn't get shipped, it doesn't get out there. So I get all that. I get that's got to be done. But on the other hand, the whole proactive thing, going out and growing your business, seeing new clients, doing more things with the same clients you got, just weren't getting done. Okay, so we talked about that a little bit, and so the conclusion was that these guys needed some help from somebody that could do the physical part, could help them write the orders, could help them do the questions from the clients, et cetera, and that would free up their time to get out. Okay, it makes a lot of sense, right? Now, so repeat
that last part again. They
needed some help. Assistance,
okay.
Part-time or full-time, to do all of those things that was tying up their going out calling on people's time. So our whole group decided some of them had enough business, they hired them a full-time, 40-hour, very capable person that could write orders up and handle paperwork and questions as good or better than they could. In some cases, they split 2 for 1. Two guys would share one sales assistant. But the point is, some people had 20 hours. All of a sudden, some people had 40 hours. They could do the stuff just as good and just as quick as them. Now, so a 20-hour person ought to free up 20 hours or so if they can do it just as well. 20 hours or so to go out and call on your clients, right? 40-hour guy ought to free up about close to 40 hours for you to go out and call on people. Now, so we measured all of this for a year. After that year was done, and keep in mind now, these are guys that were highly motivated. They were on commission, so you can't make a case that they were gaming the system or whatever. They were helping pay for the assistants. The same split they were doing on their commissions. What percent do you think their sales calls went up during that year?
Calls?
Yes.
Calling people?
Well, physically going out, darkening the door of their clients, which was the whole point of hiring the sales assistant, what percentage do you think their sales calls went up?
How many people are we talking?
Doubled.
Double, okay. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a percentage now, but let's say it was about 12 people. But so percentage-wise, though, it wouldn't matter if it was 1 or 12.
Right.
What percentage do you think that their calls went up? Matt said double, 100%.
I say 20%.
Okay. Anybody else?
You said double?
Yeah. It was statistically, and I'm not exaggerating this one bit, it was as close to 0 as you could statistically measure. Now, even 100% should have been light, because if you had 40 or 50 hours during the day, and you before were only able to carve out 2 or 3 hours, and now you got a 40-hour person, you could make the case that you should have been able to call on 5 times as many people or whatever, because you went from 4 to 5 or 6 or 8 hours to 40 hours, because you got a 40-hour person there. So, but Matt's answer was, should have been very logical. I'm telling you, it was as close, and I'm not skewing the numbers, and I'm not making this stuff up. And I'm gonna give you 2 or 3 other examples, but I'm trying to convince you. If you got to take any question of what I'm making here, we're not making a point of what's going on in people's heads, whether they realize it or not. And by the way, I don't know that anybody could say that there was any more coffee drunk during that time, any more ball games talked about outside in the hall, or anything else. I'm talking about guys that are on 100% commission and whatever. So you really just can't get there with normal thinking. But it was essentially 0%.
So they were totally. What was their excuse?
What do you think it was?
I don't know.
Well, it's the same answer as all the answers.
Just couldn't find the time.
Couldn't find the time. Didn't get around to it. I was too busy. Whatever it was, I'm working on questions and stuff with my clients. I still had a lot of stuff going on in the office I couldn't get away from. All of which don't add up if you're trying to think the way I'm talking about thinking. But they believed it.
Yeah.
There was nobody saying, I kind of like not having a lot to do and not selling much stuff, but I don't want to admit to that. I mean, nobody felt that way. It was this whole mindset that going out and making the calls was still, in their mind, a proactive thing. I'm going to do it when I get all this other stuff done. Then I'm going to go out and call on these guys, as opposed to somehow saying, I know I've got the time to do it. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to schedule it. And then once I've got it scheduled, I've got to show up. I've already got it on my books, and somehow just know that turning that proactive item into a reactive, which is you're going to hear me say that more and more, by the way, turning proactive things into reactive. If they started out saying, I know I got the time, if I don't watch, I'm gonna get caught up in, I'm gonna get sucked, my time's gonna get sucked up into this vortex, and I'm never gonna know where it went. If I know I've got the time, because I got this system, and I go ahead and I book appointments, and I plan when I'm gonna be where, now I've turned my proactive into reactive. Now if I told a guy I'm gonna be there Thursday at 9 o'clock, guess what? I'm gonna figure out a way to be there Thursday at 9 o'clock, and then you can start seeing that happen. Yes, Nick.
So my question was, so the assistants that were hired,
Yes.
were supposed to make up for all the time lost. So let's say they were 80 hours behind their work. Now they hired an assistant.
Well, let's say we're starting at 0. That's the only way to make sense of this. They've been taking care of the business as they went in terms of orders written up and all that. So now the assistant walks in the door today. I'm halfway caught up. But I'm going to get new orders in that somebody's got to handle the logistics for us. So let's take that example as a starter.
Okay.
New order comes in. Here it is, Mr. Sales Engineer. I'm going out the door. Okay, but it did not work that way.
Okay.
Okay.
So they were behind on their work so much so that when the
No.
So the assistants hired made up for all the time
Should have been able to handle the time that the new orders and the new projects and the new questions were requiring, and somehow, at the end of the day, it did not show up. Okay? All right, let me give you a couple other quick examples. Now here again, these examples are pretty important, because if you question anything about them, ask me. Because if you buy in to what's actually going on, then you're going to look at everything you do, personally and business, in a different manner than just this whole didn't have the time, didn't get around to it, whatever. In fact, let me go ahead and give you this. It's a little bit ahead, but all of you that, right, you got all those things you're going to do when you get around to it. I've probably given you one of these before. These are around to it. So all the things you're going to do when you get around to it, you've now got around to it. And so you don't have to be waiting anymore. You carry that around the pocket. And so all those things you're going to do when you get around to it, now that you got around to it, you're okay.
Yeah, we're
right
now.
So
did you make these down?
well, I'd heard the concept somewhere, and I'd seen somebody that had a big wooden one, and I said one day, there's bound to be somebody out there that's got one that you can carry around in your pocket that's kind of like a chip, and sure enough, I went online and there they were. You find anything you want online, and
You
so
went around to it.
it's around to it. So John Michael, John Michael will kind of joke nowadays, because I gave him one day. He'll say something about when I got around. In fact, then Catherine will tell me something I've told her I hadn't gotten around to doing yet. She'll say, "Well, Dad, you need around to it."
Oh, I see, you have around to it.
She'll say, "You got around to it, so why didn't you get it done?" Well, everybody struggles with this stuff. It's not a magic pill, but if you get the mindset. So I'm not going to say you can't point out the same stuff on me. I'm a human too. I told you this is human nature, right? It's not just something that overnight you do, but I think about it on everything I do, and I'm not as inclined to kid myself and say, yeah, it's something I really want to do, and I never got around because I was too busy. I at least know when I'm lying to myself, and so I'm not. It's not to say I don't have to struggle with it like everybody else, but I know the difference. So okay, but now that you got that round. Once you got that round to it, you've got a lot of things that you can do because of that. Okay. All right, let me give you another example. I'll give you an example of sales assistants. We used to have some service supervisors, and they were, it was a lady, and she would dispatch about 22 service engineers, service technicians. She would take the calls. ABC building would say, "My air conditioning unit's down. Can you send somebody out to repair it?" She'd send them out. She would keep up with it, get another call. She had those guys. Another guy would call in and say, "I finished my job early. You got another project for me?" "Yeah, I got somebody else that needs you out there." So they call in. She dispatches them. Now, guess what? She's supposed to also do the paperwork. Okay, we need something to be able to bill these guys on. So she's supposed to fill it all out. Here's who went. Here's how long he was there. Here's what he did. Here's his rate per hour. Let's send that over to billing so they can bill it. But that didn't have a real deadline on it. Just need to get that done quick as you can. But keep in mind, now she's fighting that darn phone call all day. Folks calling in needing work. Folks calling in saying they're done with work. I got to move this guy over to here and whatever. Pretty hectic and whatever. Now, what do you think started happening with the paperwork?
Never got done.
Backed up. What was that she said?
I said never got done.
That wasn't getting done. Now, and what do you think she would say when you said, "Why didn't it get done?"
Just need to get around to it.
All right, didn't get around to it. Too busy. I'm fighting this darn phone all day. Our business has grown a little bit. We've got extra guys now. Just can't get it done. Okay, so the general thinking is, well, she needs some help. Okay, now I don't know in my mind if she just barely was able to get the stuff done already that you need a whole other person. I mean, my mindset would be, why don't we get a part-time or something to help? But regardless, whoever was managing the service said, all right, we're going to get a whole other person, and we'll let each of them manage like 11 people. and they can manage what they're doing all day, and then they'll have plenty of time to get the paperwork done. So that's what they did. Hired another person, trained her, and now they have 11 people to put these. How well do you think those guys did on getting the paperwork in?
They didn't do it.
Why didn't they do it?
They didn't get around to it.
All right, and do you think they were sitting around chit-chatting more than they were before? The point is, they don't even know why they couldn't do it. But it was but same thing. They never got the paperwork done. And if you were to check,
What did they do? What
pardon?
were they doing? And that was the job?
They somewhere along the line, just the handling of the calls and the going out took as much time with 11 people as it did with 22 people, and nobody could have told you where it went. It's just a human nature thing.
I wonder if it's just because when she has more people, she figures she has to spend less time with each one.
Probably, yeah, there's a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure there that says I've got to get this other stuff done. So let me make sure I get that done, get it efficiently, get it done, be done with it, move on to the next. And it's a mindset thing. I don't think that person would have been able to tell you where the extra time went, because this stuff isn't just linear. Like I said, it's not like punching out, widgets or whatever else. It's a mindset thing. But the fact that their reactive stuff all got done, their proactive stuff, none of it got done, that's the thing I'm trying to convince you, that this really, really does happen. It really, really does happen with each one of you guys. And it happens personally, business, and everything that's in between. And here again, I want to convince you that. I don't want you to just shrug your shoulders and say maybe or whatever. I want to give you enough examples to where you say, I believe. And if you do, we can get there. We can do something with that. We can all of a sudden, there's some things that we can do to break through and we're going to talk about. Let me give you one other example, and then just to make this point. Some years ago, I went to this national parts meeting, and there were parts department people from all over the country there. It was probably, I don't know, at least 1,500 people there, maybe more, maybe 2,000. And they hired a guy to come in to do public speaking. That was one of the things that they had. And this guy was pretty good. He'd written books, and he was hired, big high-powered guy that gave talks. And he was pretty good, and he was a little more on the whole motivational time business. So again, I've already said that's not necessarily where I'm going, but that is very worthwhile. Now, one thing that he talked about, and I remember this very well, he said, "How many of y'all would like to read more?" Okay, you'd like to read more? Okay. And how many arms do you think hands went up in the room? Everybody said, "I'd love to read more." Okay. And he said, "Okay, how many of you think that there's at least a dozen books out there that you can make a note of?" Somebody said that, gosh, this is a great book. Some of it might be business books. Some of it might be relationship books. Some of it might just be, fiction, because you just really like that. But I'm going to at least put the emphasis on things that would improve you: relationships, business, travel, sales, whatever. How many of you think there's a dozen books out there that if you read them would make a big impact in your life? Most everybody, okay, raise your hand. I got some good hands here. Now, so think about that. You could probably say, "Gosh, so-and-so said this was a wonderful book, but why hadn't I read it?"
They get around to it.
They get around to it. They might count. Okay, it's the same answers on every question, by the way. So let me just tip you off a little in advance there. So he said, "All right." He said, "You don't have time. And there's a task here that you're saying would have a big impact for you. Let's talk about this a minute. How many pages are in a normal book?" People say, "Well, I don't know, 300 pages or so." How many days are there in a month?
30.
Okay, about 30 days or so. So that's about 10 pages. And then how many months are there in a year?
12.
About 12. Okay, now, so he said, now think about this. You got 12 books you want to read. Over a year, if you read one a month, that's 12. There's 30 days in a month. 30 into 300 is 10. How long would it take you to read about 10 pages? And they said, I don't know, 10 minutes? He said, okay, now let's back up. He said, so for 10 minutes a day, And how many total minutes are in the day? Is 24 times 60. It's a bunch. I mean, that's 13, 14, 1500. I mean, lots of minutes. For 10 minutes a day, you can do something that you all said. I asked and you raised your hand that was a high impact task for you. How many of you realistically don't think that you have 10 minutes available in a day to do something that you really, really want to do? And everybody said, well, no, hell, I can do that. Okay? He said, all right, how many of y'all are going to commit to this coming year that you will read 10 pages in a day because you know you can do it and you know it's a high impact? And everybody said, yeah, we'll do that. So just about everybody in there said, you know, okay, you got me. There's enough minutes in the day. It's only 10 minutes. It's high impact. You know, I'm down. Now, coincidentally, I mean, that could have been the end of the story. Coincidentally, they invited that guy back the next year. That's an absolute fact. I was there next year too. And he had enough, this guy's good enough, he had enough extra stuff to talk about. He didn't give the same talk. But towards the end, he said, by the way, y'all remember, I was here last year, those of you who were here. Everybody says, yeah. He said, y'all remember me talking to you about that, read the books and whatever. He said, how many of y'all read your books during the year? How many hands would you say go up? Take a poll.
0.
1.
I think there might have been one guy way back in the back, or maybe over here. It was somewhere.
It wasn't you?
No, I didn't read mine either. I didn't get around to it. I didn't have time. It was somewhere between 0 and 2. It just depended on how far you could look over the audience. It was just silence. Now this gets back to my whole point of that missing link, that gap in the middle. Here you got a guy that's very good on motivation, and he's pretty darn good on time management, and somehow he didn't close the sale. He didn't get the job done. Now, how would I have done that different? If I were him, I would, and I think he's got a darn good shot to make this one work. If I was him telling that story, I would have started out just like he did the first time around. I'd have said, how many of y'all got a group of 12 books you'd like to read big impact? Everybody said, yeah, hell, yeah, I'm in. And I'd gone through the whole 12 months, 30 days, 10, and I'd got everybody to buy in, and yeah, I'm going to do that. And then I'd have said, now, you know, I met with these guys last year. I met with another group besides y'all last year, and I went through this, and everybody was ready to do it. And I said, I'm going to tell you, I came back a year later and asked those guys, I said, all you in here are ready to do this, right? Everybody's like, yeah, I'm going to read those books. And I said, and I'd go through the whole routine, and I'd tell that story, and I'd say, when I came back the next year, how many of them you think had read the books? And I would go through that whole deal. It was none. And I'd say, does that make sense to any of y'all? And I'd have people, I'll mark this thing down, and I would hopefully have an outland deal of folks saying, no, that doesn't make sense. Folks could find 10 minutes on a high impact deal, and I said, well, that's the way it turned out. I said, and then I would have said, I would have gone through this whole proactive, reactive thing, and I would say, look, it isn't that these folks are bad folks. It's not the fact that you're bad folks. It's not the fact that you don't want to do it. I believe you. I don't think you're lying to me when you raise your hand and say you're going to do it. But I would go through that whole human nature thing and try to prove that to them. And I said, now, if I have proven that to you, and I've got you on board, believing that, I said, you've got to make this work. You've got to, if you agree you've got the time, and you agree that the whole thing is it's a proactive thing, and that's the difference, and you buy into the concept, we've got to turn that proactive thing into reactive. So besides you guys saying right now, the ones of you that you're going to do it, I want you right now to make a plan. You write it down or do it mentally. When are you going to do that every day? I want it either in your iPhone, on your day timer, or just mentally. When am I going to? I want you to schedule it. Silly as that sounds, it might be that you say, well, the first thing when I get up in the morning, I'm going to carve out 10 minutes when I first get up. It doesn't matter what time I get up. I'm going to carve out 10 minutes. It might be that you say, right before I go to bed, I'm going to have my book next to my bed, and I'm going to read those 10 pages right before I go to bed. It might be that some of you usually go out to lunch on your own, so you're not rude if you're not chit-chatting, and you say, I'm going to schedule that. At noon every day when I go, I'm going to read 10 pages during that time. Now, if you got people mindset-wise saying, you know, this guy's right, he's convinced me of this whole reactive, proactive thing, he's convinced me that I'm probably, even though I'm raising my hand, I'm probably not going to get around to it. But if I buy into that, I can schedule it now. I think if you came back the next year, I'm not naive. You're still going to have a number of folks not raising their hand, but I bet I got a shot a year from now of having a third of the folks, half the folks, who knows, maybe 2/3 of the folks raising their hand saying, yeah, I read those damn books. You know, I got it done. But it's only because I had to have them buy in, I had to convince them of that missing link between the wanting to do and the time management. And if I can convince them of that, and that's the reason I wanted to give y'all enough examples to get y'all to buy in to this whole business of time not being linear in terms of how you use it. And conceptually, if I can convince you of that, then we got a shot at doing a lot of stuff. And that's, and again, I don't care whether that lot of stuff has anything to do with business or work or anything or personal otherwise. Yes, Nick.
Thank you. So, and I think your examples are helpful. My question is, what about someone who says, look, that's fine, I can schedule it in every single day, but no 2 days look the same, and there's enough external circumstances that come out of my control that cause me to do other things other than what I planned on doing. So each day, so I want to read this book, and I schedule it. I want to even do something even more important, that I schedule it every day, or schedule when I'm going to do it. But there's so many external circumstances.
Okay.
No 2 days are alike. That
All right.
I can say
First of all, if you can convince the guy that he's using his time, that his time use has a lot more to do. That first comment I made of habit and comfort level, and he's not continually making that as an excuse to himself. If you can convince him of that, he's got a shot at overcoming any of that schedule stuff. For instance, let's pick on the book. Let's continue to pick on the books as an example. If we want to talk about the sales calls, we can do that too. But let's just do the one we're talking about. I don't care what's going on during his day. There's no reason why he couldn't have 10 minutes when he gets up, or need be, set the clock 10 minutes earlier. Whatever's going on in his life is going to my schedule. Shouldn't happen then, shouldn't happen at the end of the day. If the guy knows, or the girl, that she's got lunch to herself every day, if the lunch is unpredictable, don't schedule it then. But I'm suggesting there are times when you know that you can schedule that. Now, let's go back to the business nature of wanting to call on people more. If I'm going to tell you, if you've scheduled to go call on Mr. Johnson at 10 o'clock tomorrow, guess what? Somewhere around 10 o'clock, you're not going to be. You're going to have somehow worked around whatever this stuff is going to do. It's just the human nature works in your favor. You have turned it proactive. And if you've got a Mr. Johnson scheduled 3 times a day, 5 days a week, I can tell you, it's just magic how that works. Is that you don't let your mind start saying, I really don't have time to go see Mr. Johnson. You've got an appointment with him. Right. So it all has to do with continually working your head to try to carve out these times, either literally something loose like reading the book. It probably is best end of the day, beginning of the day. Then you can't make an excuse that you were too busy. Business-wise, actually get on the calendar, make appointments, whatever. Or if you got a supervisor, or you're the supervisor for somebody else, talk through the fact you got this task. And maybe it was very proactive. Maybe in the old line of thinking it would be do this when you can, work this in when you can. The new line of thinking would be, let's talk about when it makes sense that this would be finished. And so between the two of you, whether you've got a supervisor or you're supervising somebody else, y'all agree, all right, I should easily be able to work this in by a week from Friday. Okay, now, is that we all agreeing on? Let's put it on the calendar. Then guess what? Your mind starts working towards that, no different than a test in school or whatever else. You've got a mindset now that you've got it on the calendar. So I'm not telling you this is easy, but I'm telling you if you ever fall into that trap of everything being optional, and that we're going to do it when we get around to it, I'm telling you, you'll be right back into it. I'm suggesting that we do have the time for it. And that if we can somehow make it a little more reactive, a little more planned, that we can pull it off. Okay. You know, and systems are real important to do that. You know, I gave you the example of just, all right, we're going to do it first of the day, end of the day. But when Ryan and Catherine were growing up, and to a lesser extent, John Michael and Christopher and Matthew, but what was one of the things we did at night every night?
Play games, tater time.
Tater time. Okay, we had this thing tater time where we had this whole list of oddball games, and we would at night we would do those every night. Now, if I had to every night, you know, I got a lot of work to do. I mean, that might sound like a silly example, but let's think that out a minute. If I had to every night say, why don't we do something as a family with the kids and play something? Guess what? There'd probably be a lot of nights that I'd say, man, I'm tired, or I'm too busy, or there's too much going on. But guess what? I couldn't do that because it was tater time, right? I mean, it sort of takes a life of its own. So, you know, no matter how tired I am, somewhere after dinner, Ryan and Catherine are like, what we're going to do for tater time tonight? And then they start discussing that. Well, that's not an optional program. And guess what? You know, it didn't take that much time, and we just did it every night. And but I guess I'm suggesting that the more there are things that you want to do, and you can somehow get into a routine or when to do it. And maybe it's take your wife. I know I'm the only one married, and I'm the only two that's married in this group. But you know, I want to go out on a date every Wednesday, at 7 o'clock or whatever it is. Then it's like having the deal with your client. You just do it, and so rather than look back and say, gosh, we don't ever go out anymore. You look back and say, well, we at least went out, one nice time a week, and you made that happen. Don't have a lot of money? There's things out there that don't have to be that expensive, one way or another. So, but I guess point is, whether it be personal or otherwise, I think those are some ways that you get out of this whole business of I didn't have time to do it. I didn't get around to it. Now, if we kind of agree conceptually that that's the way things work out, there's a lot of ways you can use that in your advantage. First of all, on the personal deal, I'm saying schedule those things just like you'd schedule anything else. You want to, if you want to go to the movie every so often, decide kind of when you want to go, or maybe sit down with your group or your boyfriend, girlfriend, or whoever it is once a week, and sort of let's plan out our week and whatever. Now, I know it's real easy to say, oh, I want to be a little more spontaneous, and I don't want to have to plan everything. I would, and that's easy to think that way, right? I would have two comments to that. Number one, kind of like Dr. Phil would tell you, how's that working out for you? I mean, that's the first thing I would say. If you're happy, if you're happy looking back with how you used your time and whatever, I'm never going to be the one to tell you, oh, but you could have done this or that or the other. I don't care. That's missing the whole point if you do. So if you're happy with what you're doing, then don't worry about it. Otherwise, you've got to be a little more planful. Secondly, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. Being spontaneous and planful. Plan some of it, and then try to be as spontaneous as you can with the other. But I'm going to tell you, if somehow this sounds a little bit foreign, that gosh, I don't want to be planning a date. I don't want to be planning when I'm going to the movie and whatever. And I'm just telling you, then just know that all of these things that are supposed to fall into the category of proactive, you probably are not ever going to get there. And if you're okay with that, that's okay. I don't care.
Or make that time regular, but maybe
Right.
be spontaneous and don't choose the restaurant until
Yeah.
that day, or don't choose the movie until that.
That's a good example. Either look at it right. Either look at it. Yeah, I always wanted to be able to do something just totally spontaneous. I didn't have it on the calendar. That's good. I like the idea. And that's a good combination. But otherwise, I'm telling you, all I'm trying to avoid with this whole discussion is that you don't look back after a month or two or three or a year or a lifetime and say, I wanted to get that extra degree. I wanted to do a little different job. I wanted to do more with my kids and now they're grown. You know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and say, where did the time go? That's all I'm trying to avoid. If you're happy with what you're doing, I'm not here doing a motivational, you know, you ought to aspire to better job, better everything. That's missing the point. The point is, whatever it is you want to do, my concept is to realize you're not getting it done right now because of the human nature thing. But that's a good example, ain't Kevin? Now, let me give you some examples in business here. If you start thinking this way, everything you look at things, your relationship with clients, no different than with boyfriends and girlfriends and whoever, starts looking a whole lot different in how you use your time. If you let's say you call on a client and you tell him what your company does, and he says, "Man, I like this. I like what I'm seeing here." Or I like that script, or whatever. And man, I'm gonna get with old Joe, my CFO, and I'm gonna get with Henry, my plant manager, and I'm gonna get back to you. Now let's say, and he seems very sincere. And then let's say a week or two or three goes by, and he doesn't get back to you. What's your normal thinking?
He forgot.
He didn't make time for it. And he forgot.
Okay, and what would you say?
He forgot.
Okay, and I think both of those are very logical, but I think it's some combination of that he somehow, your deal was proactive. It wasn't necessarily something that he initiated. You called on him, "I'd like my company to do this for you," or whatever. And I'm going to take his word for it that he was very enthused when you left. But what do you think happened as soon as you walked out the door? There's phone calls coming in, there's demands coming in, there's reactive things that he's got to deal with. And how far down the pile do you think your proposal and your notes and all got with him within a day? And where do you think those notes are a week from now and 2 weeks from now? They're buried, right? Due to no intent of his own. Now, so since you know, when you got the guy all enthused, and he's going to talk to the CFO and whatever, and you know that when he says he's planning to get back to you, he's probably not that he's lying to you, not that he's blowing you off, it's a human nature thing, how can you use that to your favor? You know he's not going to get back to you, probably. But right now, he really means it. How do you use that to your advantage?
You tell him you schedule something with him.
Okay. You say, "Okay, Mr. Jones, that's great. You like what you see. You got to go. You're going to go see your CFO, Mr. Johnson. You're going to see your plant manager, Mr. Jones.
In a week.
How long do you think it'll take you to do that?" And he says, "Oh, I can probably see them in a day or two." Okay, so you could easily see both of them without even breaking a sweat. You can easily see both of them in a week. Yeah, I can do that. Okay, well then how about you're busy, I'm busy. How about we pencil in today either a follow-up visit if you happen to be in town with them, or a follow-up phone call a week from today, or 2 weeks from today. Whatever the conversation led you to do. Let's go ahead and pencil that in. Let's get it on the calendar. Now guess what? He's now got it on his calendar. He knows how to do deadline stuff. We all do. It's a mindset thing wise. Now, granted, he might, the week may go by and he may not get there, but you got a darn good shot now because he's got it on his calendar. And when you leave, you send him an email. "Mr. Johnson, enjoyed visiting with you. We can
Per
talk
our
about
conversation.
Yeah, per our conversation. I'm going to follow up with you, a week from today at 2 o'clock and look forward to talking with you then." Guess what? He's got a way to handle that. You've helped him turn to proactive into reactive because you know that's a human nature thing and he doesn't. You turn every interaction you have with people, you've now got benefit of this, you use it to your advantage. So you always get a new date set for another meeting. Now let me run another example by you. I'm not going to run a lot of them by you. I'm just telling you, if you get into this mindset, every interaction you have with everybody, you can use this to your favor because you know how they're going to use their time, and they don't because they really think it's all kind of linear. Let's say you call and you want to go see Mr. Smith, and he says, "Oh man," he says, "I'd really like to talk to you, but man, I'm busy right now." Okay, well, he said, "I got for the next 2 weeks, I've got all these deadlines." He says, "After 2 weeks." I should be in pretty good shape. Okay, how do you respond to that?
I'll call you in 2 weeks.
Okay, that's,
Schedule something in 2 weeks.
pardon me?
I'll call you next Thursday or 2 weeks from today, and we'll schedule something.
But now, let's play that out. What do you think, since you know the reason he's really busy is he's just not, he's constantly doing the deadlines, he's not good on proactive stuff. What do you think is probably gonna happen?
You'll
You call it back in 2
call
weeks.
in 2 weeks and say you want to, so you schedule something now.
There you go, there you go, there you go. If you, since you know that even though he meant it, he wasn't lying to you, in 2 weeks when you call him back, he's gonna have that same sense of urgency that he's got too much stuff going on to meet right now. So you can take the fact that he believes that right now, because of the whole human nature thing, you can use that to your advantage. So you say, oh, okay, well then look, 2 weeks, why don't we look at about 2.5, 3 weeks and just go ahead and pencil us in. That ought to be good for you, right? Yeah, Nick, I can do that. So, okay, let's get your calendar out. Let's look out here about 3 weeks. Let's pencil it in. The December the 12th, how's that work for you? Yeah, that'll work fine. Let's pick a time. What time's good for you? Now, guess what? When you get to that week and he feels like he's got all this going on, you're in the reactive category. You're on his calendar. He's very unlikely to call and say, Nick, I'm just buried. I can't do this. You're going to be one of those reactive things. He's scheduling all his other time around. So you've used that to your advantage, and he didn't even know it. And if you had called him otherwise in 2 weeks, he'd probably say, man, Nick, I thought I was going to be in good shape, but I'm not. Man, I'm just buried. So you just use that to your advantage. So let's talk about some other little tricks of making this work in your favor. You guys, I know Cindy always kids me about it, and y'all see it, but I've always got a notepad with me anytime. Now, if you want to use your computer, your phone nowadays, you're high tech, and you want to take notes some other way, that's okay. I have no problem with the concept of how you take your notes. But I will say that it's important to constantly be capturing whatever thoughts you got, whether on a pad of paper or a notepad. I've always, 24/7, got availability to, if I think of something that I want to do, one of these days, when I get around to it, I've got a way to get that captured one way or another. Y'all see my pads and all of that. But again, I know there's other ways of doing the same thing. I've got a pad right there by my bed when I'm sleeping, and I do sometimes lay down and say, "Oh gosh, I want to do this tomorrow or sometime in the next little while," and I'll make a note of it. I won't be trying to say, "I hope I remember in the morning," but I think it's important, one way or another. Again, I don't care if it's a computer or a Word document or a notepad or whatever, don't care. But I do think it's important that as you think about stuff as you go through life, I'd love to do this with so-and-so. One of these days I'd love to go to wherever, Paris or whatever, to constantly be making lists of stuff that you want to do. And that kind of gets back to that plan for your life kind of thing. And again, I'm not talking about necessarily just business stuff. But I think it is important that you use your mind for thinking. You're not cluttering up your mind. I don't even try to have a good memory. People think I've got a good memory. That's because I wrote this sucker down. I don't even pride myself. When I see a waiter come up and I've got 4 or 5 things I'm telling him and he walks away, I'm not impressed. I'm nervous. I would much rather somebody just make note of stuff that they want to get done. And I've always done that. So I've constantly had a list of one of these days I'd like to travel to these spots. Now I've got that list. If I keep up with it, and maybe that is good where a computer can come into place, because I can add to it, subtract to it, run your list of top movies. Same concept, right? Mm-hmm. You don't try to just remember those, right? You get some satisfaction out of that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm suggesting you do that with every area of your life. The stuff, you want to get another degree. You want a different job than you got now. How do I get there? You've got a business that you're doing as your work of your life, and how do I want to improve that? What do I want to do different? I'm just suggesting that we constantly capture those thoughts, be able to organize the thoughts, get them on some sort of a list, and then all of a sudden, over a period of time, now here's the part where I've already told you, I'm not necessarily here teaching time management or organizational skills. I'm pretty darn good at it, but there's a lot of tools out there that will help. So I'm not going to kill some of the time we've got on the discussion with this, but to say that if you constantly now have got notes and thoughts that over a period of time, I'd like to do this with my career, I'd like to do this with my education, I'd like to do these things with my relationship, maybe every week do this or every day do that. I'd like to do this with my investments, and then you constantly revise those lists. Now you've got all these things that you want to do that are proactive. Then the real trick is to turn those into reactive things. To every so often, I don't care whether your planning deal is once a day, once a week, once a month, once a year, but to look over these things that you want to do when you get around to it, figure out how to get them on a calendar, regularly look at them, get the things scheduled. I use the example of another degree. Go ahead and you can't start the degree until you apply and get accepted. Go ahead and apply for that. Go ahead and do it now while it's fresh in your mind. And then guess what? You're going to show up for class when it's available. When you get it scheduled. It's all of a sudden a reactive thing. I'm suggesting that whole proactive list. You got all sorts of categories. You ever so often, I would suggest at least once a week, look over it and say, what can I do next week? What can I get started next week? What can I put on the calendar? What appointment can I make? What can I get on my plate for the following week? And then all of a sudden, if you can, it's kind of like that getting one hit a week. If you can do, before you know it, that list, literally, if you think about it, if you got all those categories, your faith, your business, your personal life, your investments, your family and everything, and every one of them's got 10, 12, 15 items on there, you've got a list of 100 and something proactive things you want to do. Guess what? If you can do 2 of those a week, you've cleaned that whole list. And the average, you've done 100 proactive things, just to use one example, in a year. The average person, if they had that 100-point list at the end of the year, how many are still going to be on it?
Most of them.
About 100, okay? And they would say, I can't do all those things. But if you, again, I know I'm being simplistic when I say 100 divided by 52 is approximately 2, and you can work 2 of those things in if you really have the mindset, I'm going to knock some of these things off every day, every week. If you really can schedule those and make sure that you got your mindset, whether it's 2 items a week or 1 a day or whatever the deal is, and really get it done. Think about, kind of like I said about the book thing, think about looking back after a year and say, man, I started out the year, I had 100 proactive things without a deadline on it, and I probably was not going to get any of those done. And at the end of the year, you would ask me why, and I'd say, well, I never got around to it. And I did 100 proactive things. Is that a big deal, or is that not a big deal? I would suggest it is. But if you've got the mindset that I'm just going to work these 100 items in when I have the time, or when I get my other stuff done, it doesn't work at all, and that ends up being a big deal. I used to have a part of my little notepad that I've had literally just about my whole life, going back to college. I had one little page in there that had all my categories of my life, similar to what I just said. Job, relationship, travel, finance, faith, physical fitness, and all of that. And so any dead time I had, I'm driving for an hour or two, this before we had cell phones and stuff, or I'm in some line, or I'm at the DMV, or whatever. I would use that time, I'd pull my list out, and I would think through those one by one. I'd say, okay, what extra things do I want to do one of these days in this category, in this category, in this category? And before I know it, I probably have made, just in that hour period, I probably have made, 20, 30 notes of all those categories of stuff I want to do. And then when I got home, I'd work them back into my other list and all that. But the point is, that's a real useful way of using that dead time is to do the plans. What is it that I want to do with my life? And then once I get them on my list, then you got to use the concept that if you don't turn it into reactive, it ain't gonna happen. Then that's where you got to make that struggle of, okay, I know I'm probably not gonna get around to it if I don't make that happen. So that ends up being a pretty big deal. Part of it too in this whole deal, why don't you ask Joe Michael to check that, if that tape's running out, okay?
We got 19 minutes.
Okay, well, why don't you ask him at some point if he wouldn't mind swiping that. Even though I said this session into my time management, even though it's hard for me to put a title necessarily on it, and I know, Matt, you kind of termed like we're going to talk about managing your time and all that. Yeah, being proactive is kind of managing your time, so I'm not arguing that point, but this isn't, quote, time management. I mean, that has a little bit more to do with daytimers and all that. But if you, but I would suggest that if you do get better at that, and I'm not necessarily pitching the time management today, that does help you in your whole mindset of freeing up the time if you've got the mindset of being able to schedule something and get that done.
The time limit.
Yeah, it's 3:25. Okay, and we're close, by the way. But I didn't want to just okay. Okay, so I already said that what we're doing here isn't time management, but I would suggest to you that if you get better at that helps. Even though, again, I would spend hours talking about just that. Now, some examples of that is, I would suggest look at where a lot of your time is going and say, could I use that time a different way? Could I free that up? Now, my fear is that if you free it up, if you don't have this whole proactive mindset, it'll get sucked up into some other task that you didn't get benefit of and you didn't really do it. So you really got to have the tag team of freeing the time up, but then making sure you use it. But let's at least talk about some of that. If there's something I'm spending my time at that I can quit doing, that I don't really enjoy. Like I said, if you kind of enjoy watching the ball game and sipping a beer, that's okay. But let me just give you a few examples that I don't care if you buy the particular example or not. It's the mindset. I used to wear a coat and tie to work every day, so I would have dry cleaning. There are people out there that'll pick it up at your back door, bring it back to you for the same price as you taking it in. Okay, I know it sounds like not a lot of time, but you say, I don't know, 15, 18 minutes, dropping it off, standing in line, filling out the form, doing the whole thing, and then you got to reverse that at the end of the day. That's maybe 40 minutes in a week. You add up 40 minutes, 6 or 8 different type of things, that's a lot of time. I don't particularly like shopping. Some people do. If you do, that's fine, nothing wrong with that. But I would, if I can find something online and I can buy it cheaper and find it exactly where I want to do it, and even though, on one hand I got to pay maybe a few dollars if I shop carefully, shipping charge, but the trade-off is you didn't pay sales tax on it. I mean, most everything I buy online. And a lot of time, and I'm really doing it because of the time. Now here again, I know some people just kind of like the tire kicking of looking at whatever it is, and I'm okay with that as long as you're doing it on purpose. All I'm doing and bringing up a few of those examples is just to say, whatever you're spending your time on, do you really have to do it? Does it financially and otherwise work in your best interest? You might have a job that you can take that time and turn it into cash, whether it be a sales job or maybe, around another clown gig or whatever. And if so, maybe some of the things you're doing just that you don't like, just because you got to do it, you don't want to pay for it. Maybe it'd be cheaper to hire somebody to do some of your yard or housework. And if you can turn that time into money and be more productive and whatever. Everybody doesn't have a job like that. I get that, and so I get that there's certain tasks you just kind of got to do because it's just a practical thing to do. All I'm really saying is, I'm not taking issue with any given deal, is just to say that mindset of where are those hours going, could I not do some of this stuff at all and not take a financial hit? Or could I somehow do a trade-off on that? That's the mindset that I want to get to. All right, we're kind of winding down here. the one concept, if I ever get around to writing this book, one of the chapters, one of the
I have to get
concepts,
around to
Pardon? there you go. If I can get around to it, I'm gonna write this thing. But one of the concepts I want to have a whole chapter on is the concept of dog years. Now, what's a dog year?
7 years.
Okay, you know, there's this myth out there. I mean, it's probably close to this, right? But I mean, people sort of generalize that a year of a dog is like 7 years of humans, right? You've heard that. I've kind of, in my mind, I've never read this anywhere else. This is kind of my concept of people living in dog years. Okay? Concept is make you a list of all the items you want to do in the next 7 years. And then once you got it written down, figure out how to do all of that in 1 year. Okay, whether it's personal stuff, business, or otherwise. And there's nothing magic about 7. You know, if I wasn't trying to match up with the dog years, I'd probably give it a 5-year plan example. But the concept is the same. People have got all these things they want to do one of these days, and realistically, they're not going to get them done in 5 or 7 or 10. And I'm suggesting that more times than not, I give you the example, you got 100 proactive things, if you did 2 a week, you did a whole list in 1 year. That's the mindset I want, that as soon as you get a proactive thing on your list, you start figuring out, how am I going to get it done in the amount of time I've got? And that's the whole mindset. I'm not into the, you know, it's all kind of planning right now, but that's the mindset that we want to do. Okay, let's kind of review. We're winding down now. Let's kind of review where we started and where we ended today. The big things that I kind of want us to walk away from here capturing is that there's a lot of motivational talk. There's a lot of time management talk, but I think the real disconnect where people are not doing what it is they want to do with their life has to do with that missing link of not realizing that it's not as simple as having the hours in the day and availability to do it. And so that brings up item number 2, which is that how we use our time has a lot more to do with the habits and the comfort levels than the actual hours in the day. That's not to say people aren't busy, they are. But in terms of actually how to use their time, if you're realistic, you'll look back and say, I got all the reactive stuff done, I didn't get any of the proactive stuff done.
What do you mean by the comfort level again?
Comfort level meaning I've got stuff running that are tasks that ought to get done, but when you start picking out what I'm going to do today, some things you kind of like a little better, or you gravitate to a little bit better. Somehow the things that you're not as interested in doing, or it doesn't have a date on it. Those are the ones that get passed over quicker than the proactive things that you kind of enjoy, if that makes sense. So it's just what you really kind of are comfortable doing, besides just the habit. So okay. This whole myth of the superstar, I would suggest to you that's absolutely on target. That the superstars in any category of your life are the ones that are getting that one extra hit a week, and that there's not that much difference between any one of us and the superstars. Concept of the noise button. I mean, those are proven tests, and we go through life just feeling like, it's real easy to go through life, get up every day, take a shower, put on your clothes, go to work, come home, eat dinner, you do whatever, you got kids or you watch some TV, you go to bed, and you start tomorrow and you do it again. Okay? The average person doesn't really feel like they've actually got control of their life. That they're the ones planning it. They feel like they've got their company is determining too many things, or the situations. So I want to focus on those examples I gave you to try to prove that point of how you use your time. The sales assistant example, the service supervisor, the parts meeting. It's pretty important that you kind of buy into that concept. That in terms of how people are really using their time, it's not a matter of being lazy or not wanting to do something different, but it's just a human nature thing of the proactive versus the reactive.
Wouldn't you say human nature also is kind of that people are lazy?
There's probably some of that, but that would be missing my main point.
They want to do the least amount of work possible for the
Pardon?
guys. They want to do the least amount of
Let me go back and say me as a manager type. Let me just answer from that perspective first of all. Now keep in mind, my people were commissioned people and highly motivated and educated and all that. But let's just say in general, I don't care what the job was. If I really had a loser person, and they were kind of lazy and didn't want to work and didn't get along and all of the above, then somewhere along the line, that's a whole different problem. We probably should have figured that out. We probably should have shown them, the doors at the end of the hall, and they should have been gone. The emphasis on what we're talking about today has to do with, folks that, everybody in here is pretty motivated and want to do things and want to have a good life and all that. That's where I'm sort of picking up. I'm starting at the minimum level that somebody wants to do stuff with their life, personally and business and otherwise, and somehow there's a disconnect between getting it done because they don't ever get around to it. And that's the premise I'm taking. If you got people that are just kind of unmotivated and lazy, that's a whole different problem. And I really don't even want to have those. I really don't even want to be around that category of person. Yes, Nick.
No,
I'm sorry.
I was just saying, I was just emphasizing your point.
Right, okay. All right. Again, since we're in the review kind of area, that whole idea of that, I'm glad Ryan knew the number. I think it's important that you focus on that 168 hours in a week, because I think you'd be hard pressed after the week to figure out where did it go. And if it's not going, if it's going in the areas you want it to go, I'm never going to question that. Well, why would you rather hang and do this versus do something else? That's missing the point. But if you're looking back saying, where did it all go? I didn't do what I wanted to do during that week. That's where I would say, okay, let's get on the program and go from there. The whole concept in terms of review of making a lot of notes, one way or another, whether it's a physical writing or your computer or whatever, and then keeping a list, keeping all that together, finding time to review it every so often, trying to get those proactive things plugged into your day-to-day reactive plan, I think is a big deal. All right, I do have one thing I want to just kind of share as we end, but even though everybody's kind of throwing in questions as we went, let me at least throw open any discussion or any examples. Let's do that separately, and then I'll kind of finish from there. Yes, Matt?
Can you just talk a little more about how you said time is not linear? So what is it then?
Well, that's a concept. I'm saying that people tend to think of, and I gave the example of a machine. If the machine's going to work, now I've already told you the whole deal isn't based just on work, it's everything you do. But you tend to think, if I've got so many hours in a day, if that was a machine, if it's punching out a widget every minute, if there's 60 minutes in an hour, how many widgets are you going to have at the end of that hour? You're going to have 60 widgets, and at the end of 8 hours, you're going to have 480 widgets. That's what I'm getting at when I'm talking about linear. You plug it in, you can sort of count on that. People, by human nature, they kind of choose how their time goes. You gave the example earlier that maybe one task ended up taking more time than it would have just because you had it available. You could have kind of tightened that up and moved on to something else. There are things you do during the day that you kind of lose time that you don't even realize you did. But if you didn't have a time urgency because you're getting your time-sensitive things done, you'd be surprised that even though you think you're busy, how tasks ended up being longer, and you took on some tasks that maybe weren't that important and whatever. So all I'm saying is that it's a hard concept. What did I get done all day? Can I tell you how I spent 8 hours and I got 8 hours worth of useful something another out of it? Or your spare time at night, can I look back and tell you what I did with those 5 to midnight, 7 extra hours? What did I do, and was it what I kind of wanted to do? It's more a concept of not being a machine. You can't, it's going to have a whole lot more to do with that proactive and reactive. and it kind of fits everybody a little different. But that's what I'm talking about when I say time isn't really linear for a human being. It's just hard to say I've got a certain number of things I want to do in a certain amount of time and get there, because you look back and you don't know where it all went, but somehow you didn't get those things done. But it's a little more nebulous than just that example of the machine. But that's the easiest concept that I got. That somehow we don't necessarily put out 480 widgets, whether it be personal stuff or business stuff. We put out, if we had 100 widget schedule, that's probably we probably only got 100 of them out. We don't know where those other 7 hours went. Other suggestions or comments or questions?
Do you ever feel like, as someone who's lived this system for, I guess, 40 years or whatever,
Okay, or more.
do you, like that? I mean, do you feel a product of it? Sometimes that like you're always constantly thinking of what you got to do next, and then you said the more spontaneous person is just kind of like, what am I going to do? You know, what do you think the overall utility happiness rating of those two lifestyles?
Let's just say hypothetically it's 50-50. And again, I've already said I didn't care, but if and you're probably a little more spontaneous than I am, but I think that would be a good mix. That the overriding thing, if you take anything out of today, is to try to think of the proactive, round to it kind of things you want to do and get those done, knowing that the reactive things are going to get done because it's human nature. So amongst this proactive stuff that you want to do, I have no problem at all that maybe about half and half, let's schedule a bunch of that, but on the other hand, let's, just because it feels right to you, do a little more, the spontaneous. But again, for anybody that would complain that, oh, this sounds too planful, I want to be, I just want to be spontaneous. That's where I would throw those two comments I made earlier back is, A, how's that working for you? And B, is there any reason you can't do a little bit of both?
Right. Well, I mean, the extreme of both is that one, at the end of the day, has everything they ever want to get done, but you're always, you're constantly doing, busy doing something. The other one just is freewheeling it and doesn't get anything done, right?
By the way, don't lose sight of the fact that freewheeling it can be planned too. I don't want to exaggerate that point, but part of your comfort level might be, I've worked hard all day, I'm tired, I just want to come back home and chill and drink a beer and watch a ball game for an hour
and do nothing for an hour and a half a day.
Okay, but point is, you've sort of chosen that.
Yeah.
You didn't just show up and before you know it, it's 11:30, and those other things you wanted to do didn't get done. So it probably sounds silly to say I'm gonna plan putting my feet up and drinking a beer and watching a ball game. But and whether you literally pencil that in or not, the mindset I think is important, that you chose how you use that time. So don't lose sight of the fact that a lot of what I'm saying is do it on purpose isn't necessarily something you would call productive, as long as you wanted to do it. As long as you didn't look back when you were done and saying, well, that was an evening shot to hell. I mean, if you can avoid having that feeling when you're done, if you wanted to sit there and watch 3 ball games and you got enjoyment out of it and whatever, and that's what you want to do, I'm okay with that. So I'm not necessarily saying let's be achievers and we never have any downtime. As long as you kind of have the mix that you want, and you plan it and use your time like you want.
Right.
That's the real key. If you're looking back every so often and saying I wanted to do a lot of different stuff and I didn't get it done, then that's on you.
Right.
Okay. So otherwise, it doesn't matter that you chill here and there, as long as you do it on purpose.
Right.
Other thoughts?
Do you recommend any apps?
Well, I read about it. I personally have gotten so, even though I'm pretty darn high tech, as some of y'all know, I've got about 180 apps that I use. Most of them are not time management related. I read about some of those and they look interesting to me, and I'm perfectly okay that that's a good alternative, maybe even better than the writing, but I just got a personal comfort level of written page and list and all that. So I don't necessarily have any recommendations, but I do acknowledge there's different ways of doing the same stuff physically that I'm doing, which is keeping up with stuff. But on the other hand, I tell you just for myself, I personally don't avoid writing just to be able to free up a tree or something, because a lot of people don't realize they farm trees just like they do corn and cotton and beans. If they don't make as many of them if they're not making as much. It's not like I saved the tree if I didn't. So if I want to write something, I'm going to write it. But I do think some of those apps right there would be pretty good too. Other thoughts? Last call. Question is, okay, the thing I'm going to kind of close with, I'm going to give you this, is kind of like the round to it that I just thought was pretty cool. But you know how we talked about being in control earlier and how big of that was? But this is just something I read a little while back that I thought was pretty cool. But it basically says the best day of your life is the one on which you decide that your life is your own. No apologies or excuses. No one to lean on, rely on, or blame. The gift is yours. It's an amazing journey, and you alone are responsible for the quality of it. This is the day your life really begins. And I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of people. Now you guys are all young. There's a lot of people that go through life, and then they look back and they've got all sorts of blame and why they didn't do what they wanted to do with their life in any of these categories. And they basically, like, you know, gave the example earlier, going through the motions. You got a job, you get up, you work, you come home, you eat, you watch some TV, you go to bed, and then next thing you know, there's 20, 30, 40 years go by, and you look back and you don't really feel like you're in control of your life. Kind of like that example of the puzzles and all that. So where I thought this kind of hit particularly strong was that that the day you decide that you're in control, there's nobody else to blame, there's no excuses. That is an amazing gift. It's an amazing journey, and that the quality of your life is totally dependent on you, and that day that you decide that is the day it just says that your life really begins. So I would kind of suggest that that's kind of the point of a lot of what we're talking about today is your life's under control, you plan it out in some fashion. Again, I know that sounds funny, it doesn't sound spontaneous, it doesn't sound like chilling, but you figure out how you want to use your time, you figure out what your priorities are, you figure out how you get there, you break it down, you turn the proactive list into reactive things, and then at some point you look back and you say, you know, yeah, I could have done some other things that I want to do with my life, personally and business and otherwise, but you know, darn it, I got a lot of things done that I wanted to do, and that was a good thing, and that's kind of where I'm going with all that. So that's the deal, and I hope you guys got something out of that. I'm glad to see all the note taking, so that's a good thing, because it's hard to kind of stay on top of the things otherwise, but I enjoyed visiting with you.
Rick.
So today is the first day of the rest of all of our lives.
Essentially.
It's all of our birthdays today.
That's right.
Sweet.
I guess I